the president of Clackamas County Business Alliance, and I wanted to thank you for a Zoom webinar with Senator Ron Wyden. Senator, we cannot thank you enough for joining us for this conversation during these challenging times.
Well, thank you.
Just one more thing here. I just wanted to say a special thank you to those of you who have made donations to CCBA. We're doing our best to provide you the most up-to-date information in a timely fashion using technology that we're all starting to master. We have several free webinars, including this one, so we really appreciate your support when possible. If you haven't done so and would like to donate, you may do so at our website, ccba.biz. And thank you. As a participant, you will be automatically muted. So just please raise your hand or use the chat feature at the bottom of the screen if you'd like to ask the senator a question. And now we'll turn it over to Senator Ron Wyden. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I really want to spend the time with the group mostly responding to questions. What I can tell you is, as the ranking Democrat on the Senate Finance Committee, where we have jurisdiction over tax and healthcare and trade and a whole host of issues, a big chunk of the economic policy that underlies the response from the Congress recently has gone to our committee. What I have tried to focus on is to try to stop the hemorrhaging of our workers in terms of their whole economic challenge. I mean, right now they are facing difficulty buying groceries and pay the rent. So that was the point of my legislation that I worked out with the Treasury Secretary, Steve Mnuchin, to supercharge unemployment, which stipulates that unemployed Oregonians, folks who've lost their job through no fault of their own, will get full unemployment and will also get an additional $600 more each week until July. And the point there, because to a great extent, we're trying to help them replace wages, but also, as everybody in this business group knows, demand drives the Oregon economy. And when people have dollars in their pocket, then they can have bargaining power in the marketplace and employers can deliver goods and services. So the unemployment package that I put together, which for the first time applies to the self-employed and independent contractors and gig workers and others, I think is not just wage replacement, it's also demand replacement. And then the other side of the coin is, of course, trying to find a way to stop the hemorrhaging in terms of our businesses. There's a suite of programs. Certainly the one that's gotten the most press is the Paycheck Protection Program. The one I wrote was the Employee Retention Program, which I think the long term is a pretty good model. It provides a refundable tax credit for employers who are retaining their workers. Now, the last point I would make is going forward, I really want to see us help the smallest of the small businesses. And what they tell me they need is not primarily payroll help like PPP and some of the other programs, but they really need a small amount of cash in order to cover inventory. A few breweries have told me they had to replace their beer, which went bad. So I'm going to propose for the fourth package that there be an opportunity for very small businesses, businesses with $1 million or less in gross on their previous tax filing, be in a position to get a modest amount of cash assistance, somewhere in the vicinity of $50,000 or $60,000 in most cases. It would be based on their tax return. It comes from the IRS, so it's more efficient. And I think it'll help a lot of small businesses with their inventory and the kinds of expenses that aren't covered in these programs that have gotten all the publicity and are bigger and go through the banks. So let's use that as kind of an opening salvo and take some questions.
Thank you so much, Senator. We really appreciate you being here. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Nellie DeVries. I'm the Executive Director at Clackamas County Business Alliance. I want to encourage everyone to raise your hands if you would like to ask a question. We do, or use the chat feature as well. We do have a question from Daryl Haynes. I heard that Oregon received money several years ago to upgrade the computers at the unemployment department. As unemployment was at a record low at that time, the money was used for other uses. What can you do to ensure future funds are actually used to upgrade the computer systems?
I think by and large, we know that Oregon was unprepared for this issue of being flooded by unemployment claims. We've had hundreds of thousands of them in Oregon alone, 26.5 million workers unemployed in our country. There are a couple of things that I've been doing, and just so that people following this are familiar with how this system works. The bill that I wrote in Washington, D.C., that was bipartisan with the Trump administration, signed off on by Secretary Mnuchin, lays out the additional federal help, for example, for pandemic benefits for the gig workers and the self-employed and the like, the $600 more per week each week for 4 months. The program, however, is actually administered at the state level, and that has been the case for decades. Now, apropos of the question that was asked, a very good one, in one of the earlier packages, seeing this coming, I was able to add $1 billion that was distributed to all the states to try to assist with the processing of the claims. The problem has been that these systems are so archaic. They're really in the dark ages. What I said to the secretary recently in one of my calls, he was asking me about it. And he said, "You're kind of a tech guy, Ron, and you follow this." And I said, "Yes, I do." And he said, "Tell me about it." And I said, "Well, somebody I think you know, Secretary Mnuchin, the governor of New Jersey, Phil Murphy was on television and he made a direct appeal to his constituents, the people of New Jersey." Now, when a governor makes a direct appeal, normally you think they might be asking for food or blood or some really urgent necessity like that. He was asking for COBOL programmers to come and help his state's unemployment office. And the secretary was talking with me about it. And he said, "Well, they must be 30 years old." And I said, "Mr. Secretary, they're 60 years old." Now, Oregon has not had precisely that challenge, but it certainly has been a question of getting up to speed. The state has hired a lot of people. They're working very hard on this now. And I just got word that they are going to try to have the most recent, features, particularly as it relates to pandemic workers, up and running this week. I do want to make one important point, because as frustrated as we are in our state with the fact that the systems are archaic, and we can debate all of the reasons behind that, the benefits to the workers are retroactive. So our workers are going to be getting those checks.
Thank you.
That may be a longer answer than the questioner wanted, but I wanted to put this into kind of context, because the relationship even between the federal government and the states on this is pretty confusing.
Definitely understand. Thank you, Senator. We have a question from William Gifford. What relief is available for the sole proprietor with no employees and no payroll?
Well, they can participate in a lot of these programs, the SBA programs and the like. The SBA's new funds really can be used, for example, at a lot of the small lending, institutions, credit unions, community banks. That person, just a sole proprietor, can go to one of those and reach out and get more favorable terms. And those are small lenders. And that has been a big priority of mine, because I think there was some confusion that froze the money early on when it came to the small lender, who might be the most interested in that sole proprietor who wants to set up their own shop. What we tried to communicate, and I made this point to the secretary, is that these loans by a small lender who would be interested in that sole proprietor are now backed up by the full faith and credit of the United States. So what I'm also interested in passing on is For those that have questions, our office, we put up at our website what I call one-stop quick help for businesses that want direct answers to these questions. And folks afterwards should feel free to use that to talk to my staff and we can help.
Great. That's wonderful news. Thank you. I want to encourage everyone to raise your hand if you would like to ask a question or use the chat feature. We have a question from Nick Vorowski. My mom and pop retail tenants in downtown Oregon City want to know why shoppers can roam freely in the big box stores, but to buy clothing and home goods, my small tenants who have safe distance protocols in place and admit customers by appointment only cannot sell their products.
It's obviously an important question, and it is frustrating for a lot of businesses. Those decisions are not made by the United States Senate. Under the Constitution, the governor of each state has the primary responsibility to address public health issues. So our governor, whoever it may be, Kate Brown, obviously now, they have a medical team around them to make judgments with respect to, medical decisions. And I'm one who hopes, for example, that it will be possible, particularly if those experts indicate that it's safe, to start easing, particularly in some of the more rural areas, restrictive rules that the public health folks believe can be eased without putting Oregonians at risk. And it seems to me, I think the person was a retailer in a mall. Was that right? Did I catch that?
I believe it's a mom and pop retail tenants in Oregon City storefronts.
In a storefront, not in a mall.
The question does not say, Nick, if you would like.
But please have that person call us. We'll follow it up. I don't want to overpromise and suggest that I have the ability to clear that up, because that is a call for the state. And as we all know, the governor has laid out her kind of policy, I guess, for what she calls, a reopening based on sensible public health guidelines. And if somebody calls, we'll try to help sort it through, knowing that I don't have direct responsibility on something like that because that's a state call.
Thank you. Yes, and I can connect Nick to someone in your office as well. I'm still looking. If you have any questions, please use the chat feature or raise your hand and I can unmute you. We have a question from Dan Fowler, excuse me. Dan, I've unmuted you. There you go.
Hi, Senator. Thank you for being with us. I own the Abernathy Center. It's a wedding and event facility here in downtown Oregon City. And we had over 200 weddings scheduled this year, the majority of them coming up for this summer. So my question is, in terms of some of the guidelines, my worry is these clients are going to start wanting all their money back because they can't hold their weddings. My question is, in doing that in the disaster relief areas, there's nothing I've seen yet that talks about refunding people their money, like where that money would come from. And I don't know if that's just a little bit of a lost area, but this whole event industry oftentimes takes deposits for future weddings, future events. And so my hope is we get open soon, but my worry is if we don't, there could be major financial catastrophe.
No, I can see it. Let me tell you what I did last night, Dan. And as some of you may know, I'm sitting at my desk in the Dirksen Senate office building in Washington, D.C. I have basically been here every single day for like longer than 5 weeks, I think, at this point, just trying to sort through the myriad array of issues for small businesses and hospitals and folks trying to cut through unemployment insurance. Let me tell you what I was looking at last night. Have you looked at your policy for your wedding business at your general liability provision in your insurance?
Sorry, I'm trying to unmute him again.
Am I unmuted?
There you go. Sorry about that.
Okay, yes. I carry a policy, general liability, and I actually carry a loss of rents policy. And both of them exclude viruses. So it has to be a direct loss of physical property to have that kick in. For example, fire, windstorm, those type of things.
Dan, do your policies expressly use the word virus in excluding any coverage?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
I know we have a tremendous amount of insurance, but it doesn't fit that mode.
yeah, because one of the issues that's cropping up everywhere is that general liability coverage really speaks to this question of business interruption. People actually can buy, as you know, actual business interruption insurance, not something everybody buys. But in the general liability area, unless it expressly excludes viruses, there's a chance you might be covered because, you know, you have lost the ability to, you know, run your business. It's basically the equivalent of property damage in terms of cash out of your pocket. Please contact my folks in the metro area at wyden.senate.gov and let us see what there might be out there to help you. I was hoping that there was not an express exclusion for viruses. Most general liability policies do not have an express exclusion for viruses, but if you'll call us, you know, let me under promise and see if we can deliver some.
Okay, I will, and I'll double check my liability. I know that in my loss of rents policy it's excluded, but I will double check the liability policy.
If please do, because I think that there's going to be a big debate in the insurance field. There are actually some states where there are people looking to pass legislation and make it retroactive to cover people. And by the way, because I've been doing some research on this, there is case law that actually supports the proposition that if a business owner has general liability coverage and has suffered business losses, like you have in describing you might miss out on 20 weddings over the course of the summer and the like, that's no different than somebody mowing down your building and causing you financial costs to take care of the damage. So please do check the general liability provision. If there are other businesses that are following this, I'd urge you all to look at the general liability provision.
Thanks, Senator. We have a question from Doug. Senator, you've been a great champion of school health centers. There are several here in Clackamas County. In the next stimulus effort, your Michigan and Vermont colleagues in the House and Senate have a package that would provide resources to school health centers and school nurses to get our schools off to a safe start in the fall, keep students safe, students and staff safe, deal with the expected increase in mental and behavioral health issues, and put our kids into the best position to learn. Can you and your staff look into a proposal and consider supporting it when you get back to DC?
First of all, I am in DC, folks. I am sitting at my desk in the Dirksen Senate Office building, where I have been literally every day for weeks and weeks on end. And I was aware of the support for the student health programs coming up in the House, and I talk to the Speaker from time to time, and I know she feels very strongly about these health programs. So we're going to be following up, and there's been a lot of interest, particularly because I think there was mention of Vermont and one other state. What was the other state that our speaker mentioned?
Michigan.
Yeah, the two of them have real track records of how cost effective those student health centers, are. And, the reality is one of the things we have learned in this coronavirus wallop, where our economy and the health of our friends and communities have been hit so hard, is we've seen that the school is really the center of the way in which you get services like healthcare to families, particularly ones that, are of modest income. A parent can't take the whole day off to, traipse around town and be on the freeways and traffic and stuff like that. So I think dollar for dollar, these student health centers are really a sensible investment. And what we know with students is if you don't, get there in the preventive kind of way early on, then you really play catch-up ball. So I'm very supportive of this, and we knew about the involvement of Vermont in this, and we'll follow up on Michigan as well, but I very much favor the idea.
Great, thanks. I know one of the things that's really on a lot of our members' minds these days is a federal infrastructure package. What have you been hearing on that front?
Let me take that one, and probably I ought to zip fairly soon at this point, but that's a good one to talk about. Is you can't have big league economic growth with little league infrastructure. I mean, it's just that simple. And people in Clackamas know this almost as well as, anybody, because you've got traffic jams in Clackamas in places where nobody dreamed that there was going to be, a traffic jam even just, a few years ago. So I am very hopeful that we could have in this Congress a bipartisan infrastructure package. And I talked to senior members that would be involved in drafting it recently. The ball's going to be in the president's court, because we have wanted to have a bipartisan package since January of 2017. I can tell your questioner that early in 2017, the president invited Orrin Hatch, who was then the chairman of the committee, I'm the senior Democrat, and I to come to visit with him to talk about trade and infrastructure and taxes. And Chairman Hatch treated me like I was his son, prompting my older daughter to say that I was in the only profession on earth where somebody my age could be considered young. And Orrin Hatch said, Mr. President, Ron will lay this out. And I said, Mr. President, we had a working group in the Finance Committee, which of course is charged with coming up with the money for an infrastructure package. And virtually every Democrat and every Republican said, as part of the tax reform bill, which became law, of course, in 2017, we said there was very substantial bipartisan support for saying that a significant amount of the repatriated money, that was the money that was coming back from overseas as a result of the tax changes, should be used for infrastructure. And the president said, yes, yes, yes. And then his advisors took it and dropped it. And now, actually, a number of states, including Oregon, have been ahead of the federal government in doing this. So I am very supportive of this. In the 2009 Recovery Act, I was able to get included something I authored called Build America Bonds, which were used very extensively all through the metro area in 2009 as part of the Recovery Act. So I am very interested in a bipartisan infrastructure bill in this Congress. I mean, we're now in May, we're dealing with the pandemic, but if the president green lights an interest in a bipartisan bill, there are a lot of us on both sides of the aisle who would like to get that done.
Thank you. Really appreciate that. We have one more question, but I know I want to be respectful of your time.
Yeah.
Okay. Sure. Senator, I sent you an email yesterday of what I see to be a brewing storm. That is the pending homeless crisis, even as we emerge from this pandemic. Oregon has 56,000 families spending over 50% of their income on housing. I would like to speak to you separately about that. I suggested an emergency declassification by the EPA of hydric soils as wetlands so we can create workforce and affordable housing on lands inside UGBs. We need to free up buildable lands and create more housing supply. This would cost nothing.
Huh. I'll have to look at the email. I want to see if, make sure I got it. Was the gentleman talking about land owned by the federal government?
I'm sorry, I don't know. It's not in the question. Nick, if you hear.
He was, I thought he said something about a federal agency.
He did mention the D-class. Here, I've got it. Let me, Nick is actually raised his hand, so now I can allow him to talk.
Go ahead, Nick, tell us once more.
Hi, Senator. No, these are lands inside city limits, inside UGBs, just simply called hydric soils. They're subject to the EPA. Yeah, they're the Clean Water Act that was written in the 1970s. We now have technologies to deal with the issues of how hydric soils function. We dearly need housing supply in Oregon. And this would be one way to free up hundreds or thousands of acres of lands that to create workforce and affordable housing at no cost. No cost to implement the program except to the developers.
And what are the environmental implications of freeing up this? It sounds to me like they would be pretty modest.
No, that's my opinion, and the particular lands that I have are in Sheridan, Oregon, and water just comes down off a watershed and flows across Missoula flood soils, and flows across that soil and eventually down into other subdivisions. There's no wildlife habitat. There's no standing water. There's really and we now have technologies to capture runoff.
Yeah.
And,
no, I get your point about the technology. I'm trying to picture it. There are so many parts of Clackamas County that when I hear about the area, I can almost picture what a particular policy might do. Make sure you get this to our office. Tim Leahy in my Portland office handles issues where you've got to build a coalition between business folks and environmental people and local communities and the like. We have been able to get some additional funds for homeless services in these coronavirus packages. Of course, it has been far less than has been needed. So there may be some money to try out a model project. I would also like to tell your folks that what I'm going to be doing when this pandemic is over is I'm going to introduce something called the DASH Act, the Decent, Affordable, Safe Housing for All plan. And the first group of people I'm going to focus on are children without a shelter over their head. And I announced this at the Business Summit in Portland at the end of the year. And the reason that's going to be the first group I'm going to focus on is children without shelter is that we have seen in Oregon that public school districts have had to have buses on the coast go to state parks in the morning and pick up youngsters who had basically spent the night outside. Now, you can only imagine what it's like being outside on the coast, cold, rainy, trying to study with a flashlight, probably not having, a warm meal. So Nick is on to something very important. And Nick, I'll tell Tim Leahy to expect the information from you, and we'll work with you on it, okay?
Thank you very much.
All right. Folks, my closing address is simply thank you, thank you, thank you. This is going to be really tough. Everybody understands this. But we also should have a little bit of pride today as we meet, because the Oregon way has really delivered. We have a lower infection rate than a lot of states. We've had fewer deaths than a lot of states. And I think it's come about because good folks in Clackamas and everywhere else said, we as Oregonians, we're going to do what I call the Oregon way, which just pitch in, help folks. It's not about Democrats and Republicans and all of this. It's just about making a difference and helping communities. So that's the end of my closing address. Thank you, thank you. We're so grateful for all that you've done. And I see Ree Armitage from our office has popped up, and Ree will probably work with Tim on following up. But Nellie, if it's okay, I'd rather not end the meeting, but let's just put it in to be continued, okay?
Thank you so much, Senator. We appreciate all that you're doing for Oregon and all your hard work. So thank you very much, and thanks for being with us.
Thanks so much.
Bye.
Nellie, we're glad that there's some staff on here. We have Bobby and Jenny and Rachel, and Tim Leahy is on here as well. And Tim chimed in on the chat. And we, I think we have quite a few staff on. We can stay on just a little bit longer to answer a few more questions. And then also my email and Tim's email are in there as well.
Great. If there are more questions, please. I did notice that Mayor Axelrod did chime in on the discussion on lands that we kind of ended on. He said that he's concerned about this end around approach to developing wetlands. There are other properties to use before such sensitive lands to address housing needs. Just wanted to make sure his thoughts were heard.
Mayor, I'll make sure that we thoroughly, when we receive Nick's information, I'll make sure that we take a thorough look through it, and I'll make sure I circle back with you as well, Mayor.
Perfect. I did get a hand raised from Dan Fowler. I'll let him speak. Dan, did you want to? There we go.
Yeah.
Hi, Dan.
Hi, Renee. Hey, Ray. I just wanted to, logistics. Do you want to get a hold of me, or I get a hold of you later, and we can talk a little bit more about my specific issue here?
I'll be glad to give you a call, Dan.
Okay, super.
We are very much aware of the insurance issue, and the senator, he's definitely looking at some of the general liabilities and the differences in the insurance plans. And like he said, there's going to be a debate on this here coming up on overall insurance coverage for viruses, pandemics.
Okay,
So,
I'll wait to hear.
And then the broader event issues as well. And Tim has been working on this too, around the clock, on events and deposits and everything from weddings to musicians and concerts and the like. So we're very much look forward to having your story in our wheelhouse.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome.
I'll give you a call later today or tomorrow. At
Okay.
the latest.
Sounds good. Thank you.
And then circling back, we got a message from Doug Riggs. He said he just wants to emphasize that I-205 is so important to the federal infrastructure package.
Mm-hmm.
At this Willamette Falls locks.
Yes, sir. Yeah, I said hello, Doug, on I-205. We've been working on some of the competitive grants, pre-COVID, and we're going to stay at it on 205. And then also the locks. We're very much aware of the state and federal partnership to try to get the locks reopened and to change the ownership structure there. So hear you there, Doug.
Yes, it's been a big issue for us as well. We have a question from William Gifford. William, if you unmute yourself, you can.
Got it. I thought you were doing the unmuting there. Sorry. Perhaps this is not in the senator's wheelhouse, but it's something of concern to me. We export to over 50 countries, and small orders, small packages, sometimes just mail, but we are getting a number of requests back from Denmark, from Australia, from all over the world, saying that it's taking longer than usual to receive things. And I'm reading more that there are fewer flights, that there are fewer postal flights, that the U.S. postal system is taking longer to deliver than they used to. Do you see any forecast as when that might be loosening up a little bit?
I'd have to check with our team and hearing what the Postal Service is dealing with. You've probably seen the broader stresses on the Postal Service.
Oh, yeah.
And some of the money they might need. So I'll check in. I can definitely, William, you see my email there in the.
I got it.
Yeah, I can definitely follow up with you and see what we know in terms of the Postal Service delays. It could be wrapped up in just the broader stresses on their finances and their. It also could be air travel limitations. So glad to take a look.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
I did get a message. Representative Reardon is on. I think he might still be typing out. I'm going to go ahead and allow him to talk and see if he would like to do it that way. Representative Reardon, hi.
Hey, Nellie, how you doing?
Doing well.
I was just listening to some of the great questions and answers, and it seemed like there were a number of questions that might best be answered by someone from the governor's office. They're the ones that are actually working on the framework for reopening. And so it is this important working relationship that we have with the federal level and the state, and just wondered if you would want me to try to get a speaker to come in and address this group and answer some of their questions about what's it going to look like when we reopen, and a lot of that planning is actually underway as we speak.
That would be wonderful. We would really benefit from that.
Okay, I've got a text into the governor's office now, and I'll let you know as soon as I find out something.
Thank you so much. I so appreciate that, Representative.
Thanks, Representative.
Good to see you, Ray.
Good to see you, sir.
Okay. Let me double check. We've got one more, another hand raised from William Gifford.
Sorry, I didn't know how to take my hand down.
Oh, okay. I think that was me then. I didn't remove it. I think then, with that, I think we have answered all the questions so far. So, Rhea, I don't know if you had any closing statements that you wanted to make.
No, just, on behalf of Senator Wyden, glad to be here today. And as the senator said, to be continued. We're glad to keep this conversation going and hopefully get the senator out to visit in person here sooner rather than later. So, yeah, thanks to everybody for being on. And Tim and I both put our emails in there. Tim is our outreach director, so him and I are both stateside. Per the senator's point, Tim handles a lot of our public-private partnership, business relations. And so some of those issues with regards to the wetlands and partnering with developers and obviously these long-running concerns, and per the mayor's concerns as well. Tim handles a lot of that kind of stuff, and then we handle it regionally as field reps around the state. So both of us, as the senator likes to say, feel free to call us nights and weekends, and glad to be a resource in these times for folks.
Well,
so thank you so much for having us on, Nellie.
Thank you so much, Rhea, and to the other staffers on, and to the senator. Wanted to say as Melissa just messaged in the chat, thank you for your hard work. We can't thank you enough during these challenging times. I want to thank all of you for attending and let you know that on May 13th, we're hosting another webinar about the addressing homelessness in the region and county in Clackamas County. So we hope that you can all join us. And in the words of Doug Briggs, I think he put it best, go Beavs.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you all, and stay safe and healthy.
Go Ducks. Take care.